Hey, my friend, welcome back to Soul Podcasting. I can't quite believe that I'm saying this, but this is episode 100 of this show. This is 100 episodes of Soul Podcasting, and it's not my first podcast and not my only podcast, but a really meaningful one. So today's episode is a celebration, but not in the confetti and fireworks kind of way. More like we're sitting together, we're looking back and honoring the journey. And I'm inviting you to be a part of my own looking back and celebrating. So you get to be a part of this process of my reflecting on my journey over the past 2 decades. And I wanted to just invite you in on that. While Soul Podcasting is 100 episodes deep, my podcasting story actually stretches back again to 2005. So over 20 years. And over those years, between my own shows and the podcasts that I've helped small businesses and creators launch and produce, I've been part of well over 1,000 episodes, not all under my name and not all public facing, but a lot of behind the scenes kind of roll up your sleeves kind of work. And I'm not sharing that to impress you, but to just say that podcasting has been a real part of my life. It's been a mainstay. It's a craft, it's a calling. It's kind of a place where I've learned, I've stumbled, I've experimented, and I have grown. So today I'm taking you on a little audio journey. I'm going to share intros and maybe a few outros from the different podcasts that I've created over the years. And I thought it would be fun to do because it's something that I've never done before. And I did go back into my cloud just to see if I could find some of these episodes. And I did find a few that I've been holding on to for 2 decades. And I said, why not just share a little bit of what I've done? And I kind of already had an idea that I might want to do something like this at some point. I may have even referred to this at some point throughout Soul Podcasting. I think I've told you guys that I might do this sometime. And so we're just going to do it now. What better time, right? So what I'll do is I'll tell you a bit about each one of the podcasts, at least the ones that are relevant, the ones that really I stuck with and that kind of panned out for me. Those are the ones I'll talk about. And then I'll tell you about each podcast, what season of life I was in, and then what I was experimenting with and what I learned along the way. You're going to hear how my voice has changed. You're going to hear how my style has changed and my confidence too. Honestly, you're going to hear how I changed. And I'm a little bit nervous about this because a lot of the audios that I created, I consider to be cringy. And it's because I've learned so much since then, right? And so that part of the growth aspect of podcasting is what I'm just going to put on display. And I'm going to come out of my I'm so embarrassed mode, and I'm just going to share it with you guys. And we'll kind of stick with the intros though, and not actually the content or the meat of the episodes, because then that would be just making this episode way too long. But I'll give you a little example or sample of what my intros look like. Either I created the intros, sometimes I would have hired someone to do an intro, and so we'll share a little bit about that too. So I can't wait to walk this audio journey with you. Go ahead and grab your favorite beverage and let's walk through this journey together. Podcast number 1. This is my very first ever podcast. Just learned about podcasting, and that would be the Christian Ladies Talk Radio. Okay, so that was in 2005. This is where it all began. Okay, guys, this is before podcasting was podcasting, before there were courses and templates, before there were best practices, before I knew what I was doing. Let me play a short clip from the intro. Get ready. You might need to turn your volume down a little bit or adjust because I'm not sure how loud it will be, but here goes. You're listening to Christian Ladies Talk Radio. Okay, so yes, if you're hearing echo, that is dynamics. It's a little bit of audio chaos, just a tiny bit. You're not imagining it. This intro was pure experimenting. I was playing with effects. I was trying to make things sound radio-like, because you'll have to remember back then, this was all about kind of the idea of turning online radio into a podcast. So I added that echo because, well, I could. I was learning how to edit in Audacity. So that was the software I was using to edit at the time. Everything about this show was experimental, from the format to like my intros and outros, the pacing, how I did everything. This show kind of marked the beginning again of my podcasting era, not as more of a business move, but as a creative and spiritual one. I started podcasting because at that time, I wanted to support women of faith. I had an online brand and website, which was more of a community. And I was leaning into creating a virtual community for Christian women where we could feel free to talk about all the different sort of aspects of our lives, from the home to relationships to our spiritual walk with God and our, nutrition and health, and like all the things that were related to our lives as women. That's what this platform was supposed to be for. And because that was the community I was part of and deeply cared about, I wanted to start an online radio show for the women who were attending the seminars with me, and we were doing our chat groups. And so we started this podcast initially as an online radio program and then turning it into a podcast in 2005. So looking back, what I love the most about this season is the freedom. I wasn't trying to be polished and I wasn't building a brand. I was just exploring, really. It turned into my building a brand, but it started with exploration. So right along that time, after I'd been podcasting probably a couple of months, I realized that this was super great for business. And so I wanted to not completely pivot from the ministry aspect of what I was doing, but I wanted to add this onto my business because I was a web designer and I wanted to add this onto my web design business. So again, in 2006, I started another podcast. So you'll find out by the end of this episode that I did a lot of things in 2006. So all the podcasting started to come out of this year. So I started my second one called Christian Ladies Business Radio. And this one was fun for me. And I'm going to play the clip and then I'll tell you about it. So the clip is a little different. This is my intro and I'll tell you about it once I play it. So get ready for a little melody that I created just for this podcast. Here goes.
Christian Ladies Business Radio.
Yes, that's a jingle. And yes, that's me layering my own voice in harmony. Music has always been a part of who I am, and here it showed up in podcast form. This podcast focused on online business advice for Christian women, and it really leaned into interviews. So I talked with business coaches, authors, and women just building things online at a time when that was still pretty new. So what you might notice as you listen to these early shows is that many of my podcasts were faith-centered, and that wasn't strategic. It was just personal. I was creating spaces that I wish already existed. And they may have already existed, but they weren't the specific style or the format that I would have wanted to see. And so I said, well, if I don't find it, I'm just going to create it. And honestly, I had a lot of joy in this season. All right, so here's a sidebar. I did create another one in 2006 called Godcast News. This show was an experiment that I leaned more into this journalism and podcasting within the church idea. It was really interesting and stretching for me. And the reason I was inspired to do that show is because I was interviewed by my local news and media about podcasting and faith-based podcasting. And so it was me. And then there was, I think, this other guy who was an actual pastor of a church. They interviewed us, came to our homes, and just ran this segment in the news that landed in our local newspaper about what it meant to have an online ministry and use podcasting as kind of a way to reach the masses with a faith-based message. So if you're interested in that, I could link to the clip of that article on my website, and I'll do that and leave a link to it. But it was because of that interview that I was inspired to create Godcast News. And I probably made about 10 episodes before that one faded, and I had maybe one interview lined up, and I just didn't feel that one. It just wasn't me. It was definitely an experiment. I don't even have an intro clip to share with you about that, but I mention it because it did matter. Not every podcast is meant to last forever, and some exist just to teach you something and then let you move on. So that's one of those podcasts where I dipped my toes in the waters to see how it felt, and then I jumped right back out. And so that was Godcast News. My next one was called Publish a Podcast. That one was my very first podcast about podcasting. And yes, this was also in 2006. So I'm already podcasting about podcasting and juggling multiple shows, which tells me something about myself that really hasn't changed that much. So first off, let's listen to a clip.
You have been listening to Publish a Podcast. For radio podcast production services and consulting, please contact me by logging on to www.publishapodcast.com. Thanks for listening and happy podcasting.
A couple of things stand out to me right now about this clip. First, you'll hear me talk about radio podcast consulting. At this time, we often thought of podcasts as a version of online radio. The language really hadn't caught up yet to what podcasting is. Secondly, I want to talk about my voice. Okay. I was in my 20s. I was young, full of vision, very earnest, very confident, but very young. Okay. So I hear so much hope in that voice, but also so much learning that hadn't happened yet because there was growth and maturity that needed to happen. And what I love about that person who was me 20 years ago is that she was brave. I am constantly thinking back to that person that I was and realizing okay, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue what I was throwing myself into, that podcasting would take off like this. But I knew that there was something in it. I knew that it would last. I knew that it was this medium where you could share your voice and message with the world in a way that you couldn't do at that time in any other way. I couldn't just get on radio. I didn't have the money to get on the radio, right? To be in those spaces, to be on television, to have a platform, and having access to a way that I could launch my message through an RSS feed was, to me, so amazing. And so I caught on to that, and I was 100% on board. All right, we're going to skip a couple of years later. So from 2006, we're going to skip to 2010. A lot of things happened in between those years, one of which is I had my second child and started homeschooling. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I had a couple of life changes where I eventually started to fade my first podcast. So I had been running the Christian Ladies Talk Radio podcast since 2005. And then that ran until about 2010. So it's about a 5-year show. So in 2010, I launched Web Success Strategies. Now, one of the clips I have from this show is me explaining what podcasting is, which I think is hilarious now, but I'm going to go ahead and play that for you.
Podcasting is a fairly new audio broadcast medium, beginning at the onset of 2005. Although the concept of podcasting is new to many people, as of April 2005, over 22 million American adults own iPods or MP3 players, and 29% of them have downloaded podcasts from the web so that they can listen to audio files at a time of their choosing, according to the Pew Internet and American Life Project. The numbers are growing by the month and by the year. So what does this mean for you? Essentially, you can take your audio messages to the limits and begin to earn a return on investment for your time and energy. If audio messages are as powerful as we know they are to be, then imagine if your very own podcast or internet radio show about your business, your organization, or your ministry were distributed across the web for syndication all over the world. You see, that's the beauty and power of podcasting. Your vision becomes known to many across the nation and world, and your message becomes worldwide, literally overnight and for low startup costs.
At the time, you guys, that explanation was necessary because podcasting wasn't mainstream yet. People really didn't know what it was. And so I had to explain the details of it. This show really focused on helping people understand online visibility and how to grow, how to show up, how to use the web intentionally. We often use the word web, the web or the World Wide Web. So this is very dated, but you kind of get my drift in what I was trying to do here. Okay, so again, my voice has changed a lot. My accent has changed. I was living in the Deep South at the time. So a lot of things are different in the way I showed up then. And you get to see all of this or hear all of this. Okay, so then life happened. I hired a graphic designer and we were planning to launch a boutique design and podcasting agency. And then my family up and relocated from the South to the West Coast. So that move changed everything for me. Podcasting paused for about a year. And not because I lost interest in it, but because life required my fullest attention while I got my family resettled, relocated, and just got everyone back to some sense of normalcy. It took about a year for us to really integrate into our new life. So I did have to put podcasting on hold for a while. And what I want to name here is that it didn't derail my work, though. It actually redirected me. So in 2012, after I'd had my year of pivot, I launched the Christian Homeschool Moms podcast. Now, this show became a steady companion throughout many seasons. And this is the one that I told you guys I recently have taken a pause for this show. So that one ran for 14 years. This show became a steady companion through so many seasons. And I'm going to share a couple of intro examples from 2017 and 2019. So here they are. I'll go ahead and play those now. Hi, everyone. I'm Demetria, and welcome to the Christian Homeschool Moms podcast. This is a podcast where I share encouragement, inspiration, hope, and practical tips for the homeschool moms of faith. And today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Monart Drawing Curriculum. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Monart. Hi, I'm Demetria Zinga, and you're listening to the Christian Homeschool Moms podcast.
We want, which is just relieve me of my exhaustion, not really about independence at all.
Right.
And we just go in and sit next to that child and provide the moral support they need while they're struggling. Don't always assume that the solution exists in a new program.
What you've just heard is a snippet of my interview with Julie Bogart. Yes, Julie Bogart, the author and creator of Brave Writer. This podcast grew alongside my life. It changed as I changed. It became one of my longest running creative commitments. But by 2014, so now we're 2014, which is 2 years past when I started the homeschool show, I revisited the Web Success Strategies podcast. If you guys remember that one that I had initially started right before I moved, and then I put it on pause. Well, several years had passed by, I had changed, so I hired voiceover artists for my intros, and I restarted the show. This show was focused more on organic growth, like SEO and branding and relationship marketing, and it ran until about 2016 when I took another pivot. So in 2016, I wrote a book called Mompreneurs in Heels, A Guide to Passionate, Purposeful Blogging. And then it became really clear that the podcast that I was running, Web Success Strategies, needed to kind of be sort of that audio companion to my book. So that's when I made the decision to make Web Success Strategies the Mompreneurs in Heels podcast. And one became the other. A new name and a new intro. So I'll go ahead and play the new intro that I rehired someone else to create an intro for me. Here's that one.
Welcome to the Mompreneurs in Heels podcast, Your host, trainer, and coach, Demetria Zinga, is dedicated to helping today's mom entrepreneur find her groove by tapping into her passions and turning them into profitable online business. You'll learn to utilize web success strategies to make your online business dreams truly happen. If that mompreneur is you, then this podcast is for you. Roll up your sleeves and get ready to find success strategies for your business. Kick off those slippers and slip into those heels. The time is now.
So this totally felt aligned to me at the time, and alignment has always mattered more to me than consistency, just for consistency's sake. So yeah, I knew how to show up. I knew how to, be there for my audience, but I'm always about realigning and figuring out where my next moves are. And so that's what I did. We ran Mompreneurs in Heels from 2016 as an extension of the Web Success Strategies podcast. And that ran all the way through until around 2021 or so. And by 2021, I launched Her Business Elevated. So let me tell you about that one. Okay. I know there's a lot here, but I wanted to move beyond just mompreneurs and speak to women more broadly, women in business, entrepreneurs, right? So I'm going to share that intro with you.
Hi, my name is Demetria Zinga, and I'm the author of Mompreneurs in Heels, a guide to passionate, purposeful blogging found on Amazon. Join me each week as I and my fabulous guests help you discover how to gain business clarity and turn your profitable passion into a plan of action. You're listening to the Her Business Elevated podcast, episode number 9. So this week's podcast episode is a little bit different because...
So this show reflected my expansion, right? I'm not abandoning what came before it, but just kind of widening the circle. And as you can see, as I'm making these pivots from years to year to year, from decade to decade, I am growing as a person, as an individual. I'm learning about myself. I'm stretching. I'm learning who I am and what I want in life and what I don't want in life. And so my journey of podcasting is very weird to me. It's very strange. I think it is unique, but also strange because I didn't just pick a podcast or a topic and stick with it and only have one show like what most, I think, normal people do. But I had several, and then I would close them out and close out those chapters and restart new ones. And sometimes with the same theme, but with a different vibe, or maybe not the same theme, but the same type of audience or whatever. So I've been kind of moving along in different directions in my life until I figured out who I am and what it is I actually want to do at the new season of my life. Whether that's good or bad is to be determined, but it is my journey. And so that's what happened. And that's how I got where I am today. So I launched Her Business Elevated in 2021. I released the last episode of that podcast just a few weeks ago. So that would make it about a 5-year show as well. And Soul Podcasting, let me share with you about this show. So in 2022, I launched Soul Podcasting. And in many ways, you guys, this show reaches all the way back to 2006 when I first started Publish a Podcast. It is the same content, but just fast forward a decade. And it's the same heart, the same content, but released in a different way with more discernment, we talked about discernment in my last episode, more wisdom, more experience, and just a new era of what podcasting is today versus what it was in 2006. There's so much more to share, and the dynamics of sharing podcasting today is so much more colorful and fun, and there's a lot more to it. It's been studied more. There's more research. There are people writing books about podcasting, and there's just a lot more going on in the podcasting world. So I think it's a lot more exciting now than it was in 2006. So this is my podcast about podcasting, and I am for it 100%. I've actually shut down my other shows just so I can focus on this one in 2026 and beyond. As I look back on this journey, what stands out most is not the speed of how quickly I'm doing things or how I'm scaling anything, but just faithfulness. I've been really eclectic, you guys, and you can see that I've woven in and out of different shows. But what I did is I followed what felt right in the moment. I've made a lot of mistakes. I won't hold you. I have been making mistakes since day one, and I'm still not, even after 20 years, considering myself a guru by any means. I'm still learning things about podcasting. I'm very confident enough to teach it to you, and I love teaching it, and it's a passion. And I do have courses and programs and offer services in podcasting, but I'll never consider myself the guru, the podcasting guru, because I know there's always something new in this world of podcasting that I can learn, and that I can always learn from someone else who's doing a great job with podcasting as well. Could I have moved a lot faster in the podcasting world? Could I have grown quicker with my brands and my different podcasts? Could I have built something bigger? Yeah, probably I could have, for sure. I had the time to do it, but my focus was on raising my family, taking care of my kids, and creating a lifestyle that wasn't completely focused on only building a business. So this was a side hustle for so many years that I always look at it as kind of like the second or third thing down the list of all the things that I do. It wasn't the one and the most important. So probably because of my perspective of like what matters to me in life, I didn't put a lot of emphasis on building out this podcasting company. I could have had something really big by now if I wanted to scale it, but it just wasn't a priority. My priority was family and just enjoying life at a very different pace. And so as my kids are older now and I'm launching my last kid for college in a couple of months, I'm going to be experiencing that empty nester syndrome. So maybe I'll have a little extra time on my hands to really focus on pushing and building and doing more. I'm excited about what's around the corner. Who knows what'll happen now that I'll have that time and I'm not necessarily just focusing on raising kids like I did before. So that also will change how I approach soul podcasting. But even though I could have moved faster, I realized it wasn't my path, and I'm genuinely happy with the journey that I've had. And if you're listening to this and you're questioning your own pace, your own path, I hope this episode reminds you that there's no single right way to build something meaningful. Thank you for being a part of the show and for listening today to my journey. And before I wrap up, I just want to share 2 simple ways that you can continue this journey with me, but only if it feels right for you. First, if you've been listening to Soul Podcasting and you found yourself curious about what it might be like to work together with me, but you're the kind of person who wants to talk before you decide on anything, I understand that. And I respect that. And I'd love to invite you to a coffee chat. And it's not a sales call. It's not a strategy session with an agenda, but it's just a real conversation. And it's not really that long. It's about 15 to 20 minutes. You can bring your questions, your ideas, or even your uncertainties, anything you're feeling about podcasting. And we'll talk about where you are, what you're hoping for, and whether one of my coaching programs might actually support you, or whether something else makes more sense. And if it's not a fit, that is completely okay too. You can schedule a coffee chat with me at the link found in the show notes, and I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can do that. Secondly, if this podcast has supported you in any way, especially over these 100 episodes, I would be incredibly grateful if you take a moment to leave a review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because reviews help more people find the show. But more than that, they let me know what's resonating and what's actually helping you. If this episode or any episode has meant something to you, your words matter more than you know. And I have a tendency to take those reviews, especially if you write one and leave it on Apple Podcasts, leave your name. I have a tendency to take those and create a social media post and share that with my audience over on Instagram and sometimes on LinkedIn, and we'll tag you. We'll be happy to tag you if I have your name in the review. So that's something I like to do. But if this episode has meant something to you, just know that I'd love to hear how it's helped you. And I just want to thank you for being here. Truly, I appreciate your support. I can't wait to be back for the next episode and share an interview with you. So that's around the corner. And until then, happy podcasting.